There are no source sheets this morning. I have source sheets I had hoped to print, but the technology conspired against us. So we'll make do with a chumash. We'll do this old school. There are chumashim at the back, if anybody doesn't have. And the rest of it will be TORAH Sheba'al Peh, which I will share with you. I wanted to talk this morning, entitled to share Heroes of Restraint. I wanted to talk a little bit about a mitzvah that we read about in this week's parasha, which seemingly is not so relevant for most of us, certainly in our day-to-day lives. But I think when we think about it and when we think a little bit deeply, we'll see that there is a very, very deep connection between this mitzvah, between the lessons of it, what it's meant to teach us, what it's meant to bring out within us, and particularly, even though it seems that it only applies to a very small segment of the population, I think we'll see that it applies to everybody, applies particularly in our current circumstances. And I'm talking about, if you haven't guessed already, I'm talking about the mitzvah of Shemita. Mitzvah of Shemita, our Parashat Bahar opens up talking about Shemita. This is one of the main, it's mentioned a number of places in the Torah, but this is one of the main sources. We have the laws, the details, the halachot of Shemita. Mentioned yesterday between Mincha Mariv, for those who are here, that this is one of the mitzvot where really the gap between how and what it's meant to be and the way the Torah envisions it and the way that we practice it today, there's a very, very great gap between the two. But we'll talk about the vision, we'll talk about the way Shemitah is meant to be in the Torah and the lessons and some of the difficulties, the challenges that raises and what the lessons are for us today in terms of that. There is a pasuk in Tehillim, amazing pasuk, and the Midrash says that this pasuk relates specifically to the idea of Shemitah, specifically to those farmers who are able to keep Shemitah. It's not an easy mitzvah at all. The pasuk says as follows. Pasuk in Tehillim says in Tehillim Kuf Gimel, it says, Baruchu Hashem melachav, giborei koach, osei dvaro, lishmoa b'kol dvaro. Speaks about the giborei koach, those heroes of strength, who are the ones who fulfill the word of Hashem, who listen to His words. Says the Midrash, that this pasuk, which sounds like it's talking about the malachim, no less, it says Baruch Hashem Melachav, uses that word. That word malachim, angels, can refer to what we translate as angels, but it can mean also messengers of Hashem. In this case, the Midrash has an argument. Is this pasuk referring specifically to the angels, or is it referring to human beings that are angel-like? There's Giborei Koach. And who are the Giborei Koach? Says the Midrash Vayikra Rabbah. It says, Amar Rabbi Yitzchak b'shomei shvi'it hakatuv medaber. It's talking about those who keep the mitzvah of Shemitah. It doesn't mean you walk into the supermarket and you say, I don't need that to mechira, I'm buying this, I'm buying that. That's not what it's talking about. But it's talking about keeping Shemitah. What does keeping Shemitah mean? It means you have a farmer who works day and night, day in, day out, week in, week out, blood, sweat, and tears and toil, works in his farm. For an entire year, he has to say goodbye. Say goodbye to the land, say goodbye to the produce, say goodbye to any produce that is made is completely hefker, it's ownerless, anybody can come and take it. You have to step aside, you have to leave it aside. And the question is, what will be, how will we sustain, what will we eat, what will we live off for an entire year of not working the land? This is not a simple feat, this is not a simple mitzvah. So says the Midrash, it says, B'noeg sheba'olam, Adam oseh mitzvah liyom echad. Person can do it for one day. Okay, we know we have Shabbat, 6 days a week we work. One day we have so much to do, we have so much that needs to get done. How are we going to survive if we don't work? One day a week we can take off, okay? L'Shabbat echad, for 1 week. L'chodesh echad, for a month. But says the Midrash, for a year, an entire year, a person steps back from the field, says, I'm not going to touch it. We all know, I mentioned yesterday, we've all seen the signs, you're driving on the highway, you see the fields, it says, Kan Shomrim Shemitah, right? So that says the Midrash, those people, he says that are able to do that, that is what the Torah refers to as Malachav Giborei Koach. That's what Tehillim, I should say, refers to as Giborei Koach. It says, Ein lecha Gibor Gadol Mizeh. There is no greater hero, there is no greater Gibor than the person who is able to keep Shemitah. By the way, where else do we find, it's very, very interesting, this pasuk that talks about Giborei Koach, refers to us for fulfilling a certain mitzvah. Where else do we find that this pasuk of Giborei Koach refers to OUisrael or certain groups within OUisrael? In what context? The context is we're coming up to Shavuot. The Gemara in Masechet Shabbat, and if you had the source sheets in front of you, you would see it, I apologize, but the Gemara in Masechet Shabbat talks about this. It says the following. It says, B'sha'ah shekdimo Yisrael naseh lenishma, At the time when we said na'aseh, before we said nishma, at that time what happened? Yatzta bat kol ve'amra lahen, mi gila levanai raz a bat kol, a voice from heaven came out and said, who revealed to my children the secret? The secret that who knows? Shemalachei hashaleit mishtamshim bo. This is what the angels say. And it says the Gemara, we quote a pasuk, Dichtiv, Balchu Hashem malachav giborei koach osei dvaro lishmoa b'kol dvar. The same pasuk. First, that we're able to say, yes, we will accept the Torah before we even know what is in it. We are obligating ourselves before we even know what we're obligating ourselves for. That is the same. So interesting already that the Gemara compares. Well, we have the same pasuk referring to those who are the Giborim. On the one hand, it's those who keep Shemita, and it's OUisrael for keeping the Torah. Why specifically Shemita? Of all the mitzvot, what is it about this one? If you open up your Chumashim, you'll see that this connection goes a little bit further. If you open up your Chumashim to the beginning of Parashat Behar, so it's a Vayikra Perek Kaf Hei, the beginning of Parashat Behar. And yeah, at the beginning, the Torah starts off talking about the mitzvah of Shemitah. We move on to Yovel, etc. But the first 4 psukim, it says, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe behar Sinai lemor. Now that's a very, very unusual phraseology. We're used to the pasuk, probably the most common pasuk in the Torah, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe behar Sinai lemor. That's, by the way, that's where the name of the parasha comes from. Right? It's called Parashat Behar. Everybody thinks, by the way, the parasha, the names of the parashot is the first word of the pasuk. It's not the first word of the pasuk. Oh yeah, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, and it's always it could have been called Parashat Vaydaber, but it's called Parashat Behar. We would have a lot of parashot Vaydaber. But so it's Parashat Behar. So it says, Daber al bnei Yisrael v'amata lehem. Speak to the Jewish people, tell them, Ki tavo el haaretz asher ani noten lachem v'shavta haaretz Shabbat lashem. Okay, here is the introduction. We're being taught about the mitzvah of Shemitah, which is called a Shabbat to Hashem. What is the basic mitzvah? 6 shanim tizra sadecha, 6 years you'll plant in the field. 6 shanim tizmor kamecha, ve'asafta et vuata. For 6 years you'll plant in your field, in your vineyard. You will gather up your grain. Ubashana shvit Shabbat Shabbaton. The 7th year is a Shabbat Shabbaton. That is the Shemitah. Shabbat Shabbaton yel haaretz, Shabbat lashem. Both. A Shabbat to the land, a Shabbat for Shem. Sarcha lo tizra, kamacha lo tizmor. Okay, lots and lots and lots we could talk about here. But their first pasuk, very interesting. Again, those words, Vaydaber Hashem Moshe behar Sinai lemor. Why does it say specifically, why does the Torah single out, that this is given at Har Sinai? Every mitzvah was given at Har Sinai. So Rashi, and you see in the Chumashim, you have Rashi underneath, he says like this, and this is a famous Rashi. This has become sort of a colloquialism in modern Hebrew, right, and in modern English as well, right? Ma kesher, ma inyan Shemitah etzel Har Sinai. Rashi asked the question, what does Shemitah have to do with Har Sinai? And again, nowadays, you're talking about anything. Somebody asks you, saying it's another way of saying in modern Hebrew, ma kesher. What's one thing got to do with the other? You'll hear people saying all the time, and it's not just in the religious world. People say, you say something, it doesn't seem to have any connection. It's become a phrase, but that just shows you what a great question it is. So he says, "Alo kol mitzvot ne'emur miSinai." Says Rashi, "We're not all the mitzvot given to us at Sinai. Ela ma Shemitah ne'emur klalotea u'patotea v'diktokea miSinai." Just as by Shemitah we have all the principles, we have all the details, we have all the laws of relating to Shemitah were given at Sinai, so too all the other mitzvot, so it's taught in Torat Kohanim. I'm not sure how Rashi really answers the question. Yeah.
Weren't some of the mitzvahs given in the desert? What was Moshe explaining?
So it's true. It's not our topic now. It does say that at Marah, that before there were certain mitzvot that they were given a preview, so to speak, before. But all of the mitzvot that we have, we're obligated because we were given ultimately at Har Sinai. But I think that Rashi's answer here, it doesn't really seem, at least on the surface, doesn't really seem to answer the question. The question was, why are you telling me that? Why are you mentioning Sinai specifically in the context of Shemitah? Answer is, because Shemitah, everything was given just like all the other mitzvot. It doesn't really seem to answer. It's kind of a circular, but the point is There is a deep connection. There is something about Shemitah that is representative of all of the mitzvot. Or there is something about Shemitah that is so central. It's teaching us such an important message that we need to look at as on the same level as Har Sinai. And as we saw before, we have the comparison between those who keep Shemitah and those who keep the entire Torah. That is what we're called Giborei Koach. So what is the message over here? What is the Torah trying to teach us? What is so unique? What is so special? What makes one a hero for keeping the Shemitah, that makes one more than anything else? And that is something that we are meant to take with us and maybe teach us about the entire Torah. So let's skip a few psukim here. I think there's a section, and it's very, very interesting that these psukim, we would expect these psukim to appear right now. Right now, the very next pasuk we're going to skip to Yud-Chet, Yud-Tet, and pasuk Chaf. But I would really have expected pasuk Chaf, Chaf Aleph, what we're about to read, to have followed immediately after the description of the laws of Shemitah. It doesn't. We have a break. We talk about Yovel. We talk about a few other things, and then we get to there. So let's look at, first of all, pasuk Yud-Chet. Pasuk Yud-Chet. Parak Kafei, pasuk Yud-Chet, near the beginning still of Parashat Bahar. And after telling us the laws of Shemitah, the basic laws of Shemitah and Yovel, the Torah says like this: "V'asitem et chukotai v'et mishpatai tishmeru, v'asitem otam." You will keep my laws, my chukim and mishpatim, and all these different types of laws. Tishmeru v'asitem otam. Seemingly, here where it says you'll keep these laws, it's referring to the laws of Shemitah and Yovel, and you'll guard them. V'shavtem ala haaretz lavetach, and you will sit safely in the land. That word lavetach is very, very interesting. What does lavetach mean?
Safely, securely.
Right, secure, safely, right? So you say, so that is essentially, that's what Rashi says over here. Look at Rashi on that pasuk. He says, "Vishavtem al haaretz lavetach, shebe'avon shmita Yisrael gulim." We'll see this in the next parsha, which we also read this week together. In Bechukotai, we have the Tochacha. Part of the Tochacha is the land is going to want, for all the shmitot that we have not kept, the land is going to throw us out as a result. So it says, shebe'avon shmita Yisrael gulim. In the sin of not keeping Shemitah, we're going to exile. Shneimar, as tiltzeh haaretz et shabtotea, ve'eratzta et shabtotea. ו-70 שנה של גלות בבל כנגד 70 שמיטות שבטלו היו. We had 70 years of exile of Galut Bavel כנגד 70 years of Shemitah that we didn't keep. Okay, so lavetach sounds like, yeah, it means you'll be safe, you'll be secure, you won't be thrown out, you won't be lost, you won't be defeated, etc. Lavetach could mean something else. Betach is the same root as the word of bitachon. Bitachon meaning trust. Meaning maybe the message over here is not just about external safety, or maybe external safety is dependent on, to an extent, bitachon and our trust in Hashem as well. And that we'll see, that is going to be the central message and the central idea here of the Shemitah. Let's see. Carry on in the psukim. Again, it's repeated. The next pasuk, we have the idea labetach again. Now, these are the three psukim I really want to focus on. Let's read through and let's think about the questions that spring to mind as we see. The Torah says something here very, very unique. We don't find this by any other mitzvah. We could find it by many other mitzvahs, but we find it over here. It says like this. Pasuk Chaf. V'chi tomru ma nochal b'shana shvit. And if you will ask, what will we eat? What will we eat? In the 7th year, what are we going to eat? We cannot plant, we cannot gather up any of our crops, right? What are we going to do? Says Hashem, I will command my blessing to you. B'shana hashishit, in the 6th year, v'asat et atva l'shalosh shadim. In the 6th year, you'll have enough produce, you'll have enough blessing, it's going to last you for 3 years. Uzratem et hashana hashminit, v'achatem min atva yashana ad hashana tshi'it. In the 8th year, you are going to you'll still be eating from that triple crop until you get to the 9th year. Until that comes along, you'll still be eating from the old. Okay, 3 psukim The Torah says, you're going to ask, what will you eat? What will you be able to have? I'm giving you the answer. The answer is, you'll have a crop in 6 years for 3 years. Okay, I think there are a lot of questions that we can ask on these psukim. I have quite a few that I'll raise, but before I do that, let me open it up. We read these 3 psukim. What are the questions that jump out at you? What are the things that don't make sense? What are the things that you wonder? What are the questions that you would ask? Not everybody at once. A question? No?
What
Yeah.
does Nizra mean?
Okay, so Nizra means, so that's, if you go back to what we said at the beginning, the idea was Shesh Shanim Tizra Sadcha, and in the 7th year you won't, right? Lo Tizra. So it's the same pasuk. It's telling us that you can't plant.
3 years worth of crops, and if they only Shmita for 1 year.
Right. If it's only Shemitah for 1 year, why do we need 3 years of crops? You might have said that it's going to be enough to have for 2 years, right? Why do we need for 3? Okay, that's definitely a question. And what are these 3 years? When do they begin? How do we count them, etc.? We'll get to that. Yeah. What?
Because the Jubilee can come after.
Okay, there is such an opinion. We'll get to it. We'll get to it soon. Yeah.
But only God can give a blessing like this, a brichati. A human being can never, right? Only God can say, I promise you,
Right.
you have food.
Right.
Why doesn't he give the answer before the question?
What?
There's a question, what are we going to eat in the 7th year? Why do they have to, when he's telling them, the Shemitah say, and I'm going to give you in the 6th year. Whatever.
Right. So I think this is one of the questions that sticks out. Right. Like I said, we could have asked this by any other mitzvah in the Torah. Right? There are many, we have mitzvot. There are difficulties. There are challenges. We don't find by any other mitzvah. You'll say it's going to be hard to keep this mitzvah, so I'll tell you. Only by Shemitah do we say, it could have just said, you're going to keep Shemitah. There's an implicit question, which is, what are you going to eat? So I'll tell you what you're going to eat, and that's fine. Why does the Torah go out of its way to tell us, Chitomru manochel, you're going to ask why you should eat?
I would even ask it more strongly. I would say, do we have the right? Let's say in the 6th year, we don't have a big harvest. We have a normal harvest. We have the right to say, we don't have to keep Shemitah. Kadosh Baruch Hu didn't give us extra food. We're going to have to now plant the next 2 years. We don't have. Kadosh Baruch Hu, you didn't do your part. We don't have to do our part.
Okay. It's quite a daring interpretation. But it's, Okay, interesting.
It's a breed.
Right.
You told us straight out, we're going to have 3 years worth of food.
So you're saying
we have 1 year's
Okay.
worth.
So
We're going to be hungry for 2 years.
So you're saying
Keep planting.
So you're saying by the fact that Torah here has given us a promise, it has almost made our requirement, ability to give the mitzvah conditional. Okay, interesting.
All of God is an act of faith.
No,
Yes.
it's not.
No, it's a
straight out. It's
Does the word levetach refer to the year after Shemitah when certain things have to be kept sacred, like you can't throw away leftover wine in the bottle till it rots, till it molds? Yeah, levetach is referring to the extended.
I'm not sure if Levetach over here is referring to that, but that is definitely something which applies. Okay. So let's let's try and dive a little bit deeper into this. Let's see. First of all, the question is, let's just understand what the framework is. What are we talking about? When the Torah says, 3 years, what are these 3 years, and why do we need 3 years, and when is it talking about? So we have a very interesting machloket, an interesting dispute between Rashi and the Ramban as to when these 3 years are. Rashi says the following. He says, so you can see Rashi at the bottom of in Pasuk Kaf Aleph. He says l'shalosh shanim. It's a little bit small in your Chumashim, but I'll read it out loud. He says l'shalosh shanim means lemiktzat hashishit minisan v'ad Rosh Hashanah v'lashviit v'lashminit. Okay, so first of all, Rashi says when it says 3 years, it's not exactly 3 years, it's 2.5 years. He says it's part of the 6th year, and the 7th, and the 8th. Sheyizra'u b'shminit b'mal cheshvan v'yiktzeru b'nisan. Essentially, what Rashi is saying is like this. You'll have to, when can you start planting again? You'll only be able to plant in the 8th year. So in the 8th year, you'll plant, but then it's going to take time before what you've planted in that year is going to, right. So therefore, he says, Ad Hashana Shi'it, when you get to the 9th year, you get to Chag HaSukkot. Chag HaSukkot, remember, is Chag HaAsif. That's the time when we gather up everything we've planted. So you get to Sukkot of the 9th year, then you'll have enough, you'll be able to bring it into the house, and then you'll be okay. But so he understands that 3 years is a little bit less than 3 years, it's really 2.5. But it counts for every Shemitah as normal. The Ramban, on the other hand, says no. He says, really, what was suggested here, for the Shemitah year, you're losing 1 year. So you'll need a double crop. You'll have for 2 years. That will make up for it. When do I need a triple crop? When do I need for 3 years? That is not an ordinary Shemitah, but that is when I have the Yovel. That also explains to us maybe why these psukim only appear later on after we've had the discussion of the Yovel. What is the Yovel? We have the Shemitah is once every 7 years. We count 7 cycles of Shemitah. 7 times 7 is 49. And then we have the 50th year, which is the Yovel, which has other laws as well regarding land, which goes back to its original owners, regarding slaves going free, but also all the laws of Shemitah, of resting the land, applies in the Yovel year as well. So you have a situation where you have year number 49 and year number 50, where you have 2 years in a row where no one's working the land. Okay, so if we say that 1 year we can get away with, 2 years, that's what are we going to eat if we're not working anything for 2 years? So there, says the Ramban, that's where we need it. That's where we need the third, the extra crop for 3 years. Okay. But he says, otherwise it's just going to be a blessing for 2 years. In other words, also what emerges from Ramban is maybe it's saying, V'chitomru ma nochal, you're going to say, what can we eat? Even ordinary Shemitah that we can get by, that we can survive with. But when it's going to be double, maybe that's a bit harder. Yeah.
I'm still not clear exactly what is the exact point of the Shemitah. In other words, what do we gain? I mean, it's not that it's like Shabbos. What are we gaining from Shemitah that Hashem hasn't?
So there are many things, and we could look at the different parashiot in the Torah that talk about Shemitah and different aspects that we get from it. One is similarly to the idea of Shabbat, that just like the idea of Shabbat, there are 6 days that I work, and there is 1 day that I rest to remember the fact that it's not us that's in charge. It's not us that owns. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu who is the owner of all the land and the world, and we cannot do anything that without Him. So too, the idea by Shemitah, that's something the Sefer HaChinuch writes. There are many other. There are societal aspects as well. The fact that you're not working for a year. What are you going to do at that time? And learning Torah, etc. Okay, there are different aspects. But right now, let's focus a little bit more on this question of Lavetach, this question of Emunah, this question of Chitomru. There's another question which the Mfarshim raise here, which is very, very interesting, okay, which we didn't address, which is the following. What we're saying is this. We're saying that you're going to get to the Shemitah, you're going to get to the Shemitah and the Yovel, according to Ramban. It's going to be difficult to keep because we need, what are we going to eat? So we need an extra bracha that comes from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And we'll have that extra bracha with a double crop, the triple crop, whatever it may be. When is this question asked? This question of Chi Tomru Ma Nochal. When you'll come and you'll ask, what are we going to eat? When are we asking this question? Okay. Sorry? When you're hungry. Okay. What do I mean by that? And I'll explain. Let me read you the Kli Yakar. The way that the Kli Yakar asks questions is very interesting. He says like this. He says, Yesh Mefalshim. He says, Chitomu ma nochal b'shana hashvi'it. You're going to ask, what are we going to eat in the 7th year? Yesh Mefalshim sheb'shana hashvi'it eino musav al v'chitomru. Okay, the way the pasuk, if you read the pasuk, it says, you will ask, what will we eat? B'shana hashvi'it. What will we eat in the 7th year? So there's 2 ways you could read that. You could read that as, we'll ask, what are we going to eat in the 7th year? Or you could ask it, in the 7th year. When we get to the 7th year, you'll ask, what will we eat? Okay, so that might be B'shat Maseh. Right, you're going to ask, we're going to get to the Shemitah. Okay, now we have to put down all our tools. Now we have to put up our big sign that says, Kan Shomrim Shemitah. That's very nice. But now you're going to ask, what are we going to eat? So here's the question. If it really is at the beginning of the 7th year that we're going to ask, what are we going to eat? We really shouldn't be asking that question at all. Why?
The 8th year, because every year we're eating the produce from the year before. So since we're not doing any work on the 7th year, it's the 8th year when we're gonna have nothing to eat because
That's right.
we've done it.
Okay, but more than that, because you could say, okay, we've still got, at the beginning of the 7th year, we've still got the food. We've still got food for the next year. So it's only, but you're going to say, okay, we're going to stop now. In a year's time, we're not going to have any food to eat, right? But so here's what the Kli Yakar says, and it's so obvious when you think about it. Read the Psukim. What did the Torah guarantee us? It said, what's the answer to the question of what are you going to eat? What's the answer?
Leveta.
In the 6th year, you're going to have produce. You're going to have enough. You're going to have enough for 3 years. Let's go with Rashi for the moment, okay? So when is that produce going to come in? You're going to have all that produce at the end of the 6th year. So you get to the 7th year. You get to the beginning of the Shemitah. And then you're about to put down your tools. You say, wait a minute, what are we going to eat? You go, you look in the storehouses. You look, you say, we've got a triple crop in here. We've got enough food. Do you see the problem? You see, if the Torah is telling us, you're going to ask the question of what will you have to eat? And my answer to you is you'll have enough to eat, I promise you, because if you keep the Shemitah, in the 6th year, before the Shemitah starts, you're going to have a triple produce. You have enough food. So when Shemitah begins, you've already had the bracha, you've already seen, I've blessed you that you've got enough food to eat for the next 3 years. Okay, so at the beginning of the 7th year, you're going to look in the storehouses. You're going to see that you've got enough food. You're going to see you've got triple the amount that you normally have. And then you're going to raise up your hand and you're going to say, what are we going to eat? We've been watching too much news, right?
Since then, Jews have been complaining. We need something to complain about. That's
We
it.
complain anyway.
So that's what...
The question is, when do we keep Shemitah in the 6th year?
No, Shemitah starts in the 7th year. But again...
But don't we gather for the 7th year the 3 years before?
Correct. That's exactly the point. That's exactly what the Kli Yakar says. He says you can't read the pasuk in the simple way. You can't read it as saying, again, look at the pasuk. Chitomru manochal b'shana shvi'it. You can't read it as saying, well, you're going to ask at the beginning of the 7th year, what are we going to eat? Because already at the beginning of the 7th year, you should know you've got enough. Right? You should know you've got enough. That's the bracha. It already comes before. What else is interesting about this? If this is the case, so we're saying the bracha, Hashem is giving us the bracha before we've even started to fulfill the mitzvah. That's very strange. That's very interesting. There was a question. Yeah.
My question to you is, this is not a hypothetical question. What has happened in Israel in the last 75 years? Some of the agriculture people do keep Shemitah. So there must be some lack of products.
Okay, so that's a very interesting question. I don't know if we'll now go into all the details exactly how we keep Shemitah nowadays, but I'll tell you two things. One is that somebody actually mentioned to me yesterday, and I saw there are reports. There are amazing stories of nowadays not everybody keeps Shemitah. There are farmers. We've all seen the signs. Shout out to the signs again, right? Kan shomrim Shemitah. We've all seen there, and there are those who say Shemitah comes. We're leaving our land for a year, and that's it. Okay, there are amazing stories of certain moshavim and certain farms and certain places where they saw the bracha. They didn't, for whatever reason, the rain came and the conditions and whatever, and the following year they had a tremendous crop, which other places did not. That's number one. We've seen it, and there are people who can tell you the story and that they have experienced. That is number one. Number two is, notwithstanding what I just said, none of this may apply today, because nowadays Shemitah is actually not a mitzvah on a d'oraita level. Soon it will be, but right now it's not. Why is that? Because Shemitah applies when what's called Rov Yoshvei Aleh, which means the majority of the Jewish people are living in the land of Israel. It doesn't mean the state of Israel is the country in the world that has the largest Jewish population, but that's different. We're not saying country number one, we're saying the majority of the Jewish people. Once the majority of the Jewish people are living in the land of Israel, so then it becomes d'oraita again, and then it's a whole different ball game. If nowadays we keep it d'Rabbanan, does the bracha of the Torah apply in a situation where Shemitah is d'Rabbanan? So that's a fascinating question. Some say yes, some say no, it may not be. And that is why today in the interim, we have all sorts of interim solutions, right? Heter Mechira, which we mentioned, and other things which we do nowadays, and there are ways of kind of getting around it. But ultimately, this is the way the Torah wants us to keep it. So And we'll get there. We'll get there. We're not there yet, but every year there is discussion, and there are plans in terms of gradually how to get more and more farmers to be keeping Shemitah fully in this way, and how we deal with that. So when are we asking this question? So there are those. So the Kli Yakar says it can't be that we're asking the question at the beginning of the 7th year, because the bracha of the triple crop must come beforehand, and therefore there's no room to ask the question because you can already see it. So he says, when you're asking the question, maybe you're asking the question earlier, maybe you ask the question at a different time. Okay, maybe at the beginning of the 6th year, whatever. That is one understanding, but there are those who understand, who read the pasuk literally, that says, that when you get to the 7th year, you're going to ask the question, what do we have to eat? So why would we be asking the question of what do we have to eat at the beginning of the 7th year if we've already had the bracha of the triple crop? So either we could say, because we like to complain, okay, but I'd like to suggest something different, which is the following. And the Sforno says this, and listen to what the Sforno says. He says, Chitomu manochal. You're going to come and you're going to ask, what will we eat? When this will be a doubt for you, you'll like to complain. And you won't have the faith, you won't have the bitachon, you won't have the trust that what? That the small amount that you have will be enough. In other words, he says, and we see this throughout the TORAH as well, he says the question of the bracha, it's not necessarily a qualitative question, but it's a quantitative question. It says in the TORAH that in a time of where there are such curses, you could have all the bread that you need, but it won't satisfy you. It won't satiate you. There's a what's called a bracha b'tocha me'ayin. It's not just about what you have, but it's about what you do with it and how you're able to use it. So he says the Sforno and say others, the bracha over here, it's not a clearly explicit supernatural thing that we'll see 3 times as much. We'll have the same amount of crops, but you know what? The same amount of crops that will be enough for you. Not that you'll go hungry, but you'll be able to make do with less, and that will, the bracha, the ribui will be qualitative, but it won't be quantitative, and therefore you'll be okay. So you won't necessarily, that can answer your question as well, we won't necessarily see the difference at the beginning of the 7th year. We won't necessarily know that it's there, but it will be. That will be the miracle, and that will be the bracha. Yeah.
What are the farmers going to do? You know,
Yeah.
How will they have an income in the Shemitah year?
So
They're not working the land.
That's right. They're not working the land. The bracha, there will be the bracha of the triple crop, and they'll all sit in yeshiva for the year. They'll all sit in yeshiva for the year.
Oh, yes.
That's the idea. So
it's a good question, because you just said that it will be the quality that it will be able to do with less.
Yes.
So the farmers did not have more produce in the 6th year, so they won't have money in the 7th year.
No, so he's saying, so what he's saying is, well, the truth is that there are 2 ways to understand. What he's saying is that there will be the bracha, that there won't be more, and there are those who say, actually, if there's going to be more, then it means you have to work harder, and it's not going to be more quantitatively that you have to work harder, but there will be the bracha that what you have will be enough. Nobody's going to go hungry. Everybody's going to have enough. The amount that normally would have lasted for 1 year is actually going to last for 3 years. That is one way of reading it, but you could read it another way as well, and this is where things get really interesting. Okay, where he says, when we ask the question as follows. We don't find this where the Torah comes along and says to us explicitly, you're going to ask, how will you keep this mitzvah? We don't find that anywhere else, right? And there are other mitzvot that are maybe equally challenging or maybe less challenging, but Shabbat. The Torah commands about Shabbat. It's not so easy. Here we're talking about an entire year, but it's not so easy to take a day off work, right? We all know the stories, particularly in America, right? Going back a couple of generations, people couldn't get a job. People get fired every week. It's not.
Saturday, don't come back Monday.
Exactly. It's not so easy. So we don't find, and there are many other examples, eating kosher, whatever. The Torah doesn't say anywhere, kosher, right? You can only eat A, B, and C, but you can't eat X, Y, and Z. So you're going to say, what are we going to eat, right? Torah doesn't say that. It says this is what you can eat. Deal with it. Shabbat, it doesn't say you can work for 6 days. You can't work the 7th. If you're going to ask, but what are we going to do on the 7th day? How are we going to get a job? Torah doesn't say that. It says just do this. It doesn't say you have to put on tefillin. Whatever. You're going to ask, how am I going to put on tefillin? How am I going to afford an etrog? How am I going to do? Torah doesn't ask any of those things. It's only by Shmita that it says v'chitomru manochal. And we ask the question, why does the Torah emphasize this over here? Why does it say? So there are two radically different schools of thought, very, very interesting on this question. One school of thought says, what we probably would have thought of intuitively, which is, you know what, Shemitah is different. Shemitah is difficult. We saw the Midrash, we saw the Pasuk in Tehillim, we saw how Shemitah is compared to Har Sinai, etc. The level of emunah, the level of faith that is required to take an entire year sabbatical, not to work the land, whether it's because of income or because of what you have to eat, or this is something that's on another level. So it's only natural here, it's much, much more difficult. And therefore you're going to say, V'chitomru manochal. You'll ask the question. That's the most natural thing that you would ask the question. The Torah almost expects you to ask the question. And because it expects you to ask the question, it's going to preempt, it's going to tell you, and it's going to give you and it's going to give you an answer. In other words, when we talk about faith, what does faith mean? What does bitachon mean? And throughout the ages, we see different schools of thought and different ideas in this. Does faith mean that I can't have any questions? Does faith mean that there are no challenges? I have to just accept that everything is fine and everything is easy and everything? No. According to this understanding, we say, no, faith means, faith is real. Faith is genuine. I struggle. I wrestle. God gives me a command that seems like I don't know how I'm going to be able to fulfill it. And therefore, I ask the question, Chitomru manochal. And therefore, the Torah gives us the answer. That's one way of looking at it. There's another interpretation over here, which looks at this and says, Chitomru manochal, not that that is a positive thing. There are those say, Rav Elimelech ben Lizhansk, quotes this in the name of his brother, Abzusha. And he says, when the Torah says, Chitomru manochal, it's telling you, you shouldn't have asked the question. And he connects to this phono like this. He says, if you're going to come and ask the question, and you're going to say, what are we going to eat? So you know what? Then I'll give you a bracha. Then I'll make a miracle for you. Then you'll have 3 times the amount of crop. At the beginning of the 7th year, whenever, you'll see there's not, or earlier on, you'll see there's not enough. You'll ask the question. So then I'll make an explicit miracle for you. But had you not asked the question, had you just had the faith, had you been the Giborei Koach, had you been able to accept that this is what the Torah said, and if that's what the Torah said, then obviously that's what you need to do, and then it will be fine. So then you would have had the bracha b'toch hamayim. You wouldn't have seen 3 times the crop, but you know what? Everything would have been enough. Everything would have been enough, and you would have and you would have managed. In other words, two radically different ways of understanding this question. That it's a legitimate question, that it's something that you should be asking, or that it's something that if you don't, you shouldn't have asked. But if you do ask, so then, fine. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Kivyachol, then I'll do a miracle for you. But really, you didn't need it. You shouldn't have needed it. And this brings to mind a Gemara. Gemara Masechet Shabbat tells a fascinating story. Gemara Masechet Shabbat Daf Nun Gimel Amud Bet. If you want to look it up, it says like this: It says, Tanu Rabbanan, Maaseh be'echad shemeta eshto ve'inicha ben linok. There was a certain individual, a tragic story, a certain person, he had a child, he had a baby, and his wife died, and there was no way, they didn't have Materna or baby formula in those days. He needed to feed the child. He had no one who was able to feed the child. He couldn't hire a wet nurse, he couldn't afford it. So what happened? Nasalo nes, a miracle was done for this person, this man. A miracle was done, and this individual was able to feed his child. To feed himself. So there says the Gemara like this. Listen to the discussion. Amar Rav Yosef, Bo orei kama gadol adam zeh, shnasa lo nes kazeh. Rav Yosef says, wow, this person, this is a tremendous individual. He didn't have anything. He asked the question, Manochal, what are we going to feed? This miracle was done. Nature was changed for him. That's a sign of a lofty individual. What a miracle. Amar lo Abaye. Abaye says, Adrabah. Abaye says completely the opposite. He says, Kama garua adam zeh shenishtanu lo sidrei brishit. He says, how lowly is this person that an open miracle like this had to be done for him, that you don't believe that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has a way of providing. You don't believe that somehow within the natural course of the world things are for you are something different. For you, we have to change everything. And that relates exactly to our question here of what bitachon is and what we should and how we should conduct ourselves. Now, the truth is, I think that these are two very, very extreme approaches, and for most people, the truth is probably somewhere in the middle. But thinking of all of this and thinking about this message of Shemitah and what it tells us and what it challenges us and what it makes us think and question in terms of bitachon and what we face, I think something that comes out of this is that Shemitah teaches us, shows us as a prototype for a situation that is very, very uncertain. And even where we have the brachot, even when the Torah tells us, right, you're going to go, the Torah is setting us up in a position where things are uncertain, where we don't know what the outcome is, where it's not clear, and we're required at a certain level to put faith and to trust in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to do our effort. In this case, what is our effort? What makes it so difficult is that your effort in the time of Shemitah, your effort is not doing anything. There is a time when you have to stop, there is a time when you have to let go, and there is a time when you have to say, I'm leaving it in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, whatever that means. Again, I'm not getting into now technicalities day by day, what a person has to do. Don't understand the wrong way. But here we're following the Torah's explicit command, which is saying there is an element where you have to let go of control, and you have to let HaKadosh Baruch Hu do what He does. And that when you're able to do that, when you're able to reach that level, to relinquish that control, and to find that faith, however you find that faith, it's an ordeal. There's no question that it's an ordeal, but you're able to do that. That is what's called a giborei koach. And I thought to myself that this idea, this model, this prototype of the farmer in the Shemitah, facing this uncertainty and being able to trust and being able to have faith, that is the prototype. No one in this room is a farmer, I don't think. Right? Even if you are, as we've explained, the way that we keep the Shemitah today is not the way that it was kept in the way that the Torah describes it. But that idea and that principle and finding that faith and living through that uncertainty, being able to manage and being able to survive and to thrive and to grow through that I think is what we're all going through, and that I think is what we've all been going through for the last year and a half. So I thought, I'll tell you, this is a little bit of a preview for the Shavuot year. For those of you that are going to be here for Shavuot, on Tikkun El Shavuot, I'm talking about AI. AI is a very, very hot topic at the moment. We're going to be talking about it from a slightly different angle. I want to talk about, if you're here, going to talk about what AI is doing to us, and how it is changing us, and how it's affecting us, and how our norms and societal norms and halachic norms and human norms are changing because of the way that we're using AI. So that's just a little bit of a preview for Shavuot night.
Are you speaking during the time?
During the Tikkun Leil, whatever the time that's in the middle of the night, yeah. I don't remember right now what time it is. But I thought so. One of the things that everybody wants to know is, is AI going to, 2 years ago I spoke about whether AI is going to replace rabbis. And thankfully then the answer, the answer is no, not for the moment. I'm still here, as you can see. But I can tell you, AI does not write my shiurim for me, and AI does not write my drashot for me, I promise, at the moment. But I thought about this idea, and what I did was I uploaded the source sheet, which you haven't seen, but which I've been reading off, onto AI, and I gave it a bit of a prompt, told it what the idea was behind the shiur and what the idea behind the discussion was. And I said, okay, give me 5 points. Let's make a comparison between the ordeal that is faced by the farmer in the Shemitah and the ordeal that faces all of us today. Okay, I could have done this myself, but I thought it would be interesting to see what it came up with. And what it came up with was not bad. And I want to read this to you, and I want to share this with you, and offer you as some things to think about in terms of. So this is a table which was generated by AI, but with some of my prompts and a little bit of editing, called Shemitah and the War in Israel. So on the one hand, we have Shemitah, the farmer's ideal, and we have Israel in the year Tafshin Pei, Dalet Tafshin Pei Hey, the nation's ordeal. So what are the things that are similar? What are the things that we can learn? So number one, the first point that I came up with was letting go of control. I think this is something that we've, as much as we think that we understand this, we are taught again and again and again. But it said letting go of control. It says the farmer relinquishes his land, his income, and his sense of security. And so too, in our situation, we face national vulnerability. We surrender routine life, stability, and security in the face of war. Okay, that was one comparison. Number two, we talk about uncertainty. It's similar, but slightly different nuance. Uncertainty about the future. when the farmer asks the question, what we saw, it says, what will we eat? Manochal. This is a question which is not just logistical, this is existential. So too today we face uncertainty in every direction. What will be? Hostages, borders, international pressure, long-term recovery, etc. Manochal, but that's the question we're asking. What will be? And I think that in our generation, certainly, I think we have to go with the interpretation that this is a legitimate question. It's a question we should be asking. It's fine, it's fair. We can be asking and struggling and grappling with it, but ultimately Hashem will answer. Number three, it talks about faith. It says over here that the farmer acts before seeing results, right? That's something we mentioned, how we get we only necessarily feel the bracha afterwards, right? It's according to one of the interpretations. And so too today, we talk about acts of faith, of people going out, sacrificing, serving, without knowing what it's going to lead. Okay, there's a little bit of repetition over here. It talks about sacrifice, ongoing sacrifice, and clear results. And then it talks about kvura, strength, kvura through restraint. On the one hand, the farmer's strength, as we said, and this is maybe, again, another takeaway message, the strength over here, normally, we think that strength is in acting. Yeah, by the farmer, the lesson is, Giborei Koach, the strength is in not acting, not doing anything, not to plant, not to harvest, to wait and see what happens. Over here, so what did it come up with? It said, Gvura through endurance. The nation's strength is in holding strong, in not giving in to despair or division, etc. Okay, so that's what AI came up with. I'm sure you could come up with more things, and maybe we could come up with better. But anyway, those are some of the lessons, those are some of the comparisons. The question of Shemitah is not just something that talks to a small segment. It's not just something that talks to the farmers. But as we said, just as Shemitah was given at Har Sinai, so to the entire Torah was given at Sinai. The message of Giborei Koach for all the Jewish people, able to keep the Torah, able to persevere through uncertainty, with faith, not always knowing the answer to the question of man ochal, but nonetheless knowing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to us, V'tziveti et birchati. If we hold fast, we keep the faith, and persevering and with resilience, even though times may be tough, even though there may be questions, even though there may be challenges that may not always be explicit, that the answer is there, but sometimes the bracha has already been provided, sometimes it's already been it's there, it's hidden. We just have to hold faith and know that it will come. Okay.
No, but the